Is it possible to go from feeling disconnected from your partner to feeling genuinely close and even in love again? Because when tension shows up over something tiny, it's never really about the dishes or the schedule. It's that quiet, sinking feeling of this is the version of us I never wanted to become. Two people living side by side instead of together. I've worked with couples in this exact spot, not broken, just slowly drifting, and almost all of them believed it was normal, something they just had to accept. But the truth is, falling out of love is rarely permanent. Rebuilding connection happens faster than most people realize. When you know what's actually causing the distance, it's not that hard. And in this video, I'm going to show you the 3 invisible patterns that quietly destroy closeness and the simplest reset that brings couples back to each other again. So why do couples fall out of love? Now, a lot of people are going to point to big things like affairs, betrayal, or just complete and utter negligence. But I'm going to point out 3 specific patterns that I have seen actually result in separation and divorce more often than any of the big explosive things that I just mentioned. And I think that it's really important if you're struggling in your relationship, or even if you're in a new relationship and you're just watching this because you want to make sure it stays healthy, that you look out for these things. Just like a doctor, right? A doctor is going to tell you, hey, everything looks fine after the surgery. If you notice these 3 things, call me, right? If you get a fever, if you get swelling around the area, you want to know what to look for. And if you've already noticed that one of these 3 patterns are in your relationship, well, then unfortunately, you're kind of in a danger zone. And then that's where I'm going to tell you at the end of the video, the reset to get it back on track. Okay, now there's a theme to these 3 that you'll see, but they are distinct. Let's talk about the 3 different patterns. So the first one is micro withdrawals. Now, when you are in a new relationship, or you're in a secure attachment, the honeymoon phase of this really exciting new relationship, think about the way that you interact. If you're having dinner with somebody, right? If you're on a date, and even if you're just having a cup of coffee, every little detail is something you're soaking in. You look at the way she holds her coffee cup. You look at the way he orders the food, right? Whatever it is, you're really engaging and interpreting because it's new. Now, what happens is there's a high level of attention. As you grow in the relationship, there's a complacency that settles in. It happens to everybody. This isn't just bad couples. Everybody gets a little bit complacent from time to time and saying, I know what my partner likes. I know what they're thinking. And the truth is you don't. For 2 reasons. 1, nobody really ever knows anybody. And 2, people change. The person that you're with today is radically different in many ways than the person that you were with 5 years ago, even if it's the same woman or same man, right? They change over time, and you have to constantly reinvest and reinterpret who they are in this present moment. When you don't do that, you pull away, you withdraw, and not in big ways, in very short ways. So what happens? Very kind of minor ways. So someone asks you, how was your day? You go, fine. That's a micro withdrawal. Instead of saying, oh my God, I had, the weirdest day, or even if it was a boring day, saying, ugh, it was a boring day. Nothing ever changes at my work. It's like, it's fine. I'm not bothered by it. But like you asked me this question, and like I'm thinking to myself, nothing ever really does change. It's just again and again and again. That opens the door to more connection, right? Even if the person says, yeah, I've noticed that too. Does that bore you? No, not really. I'm happy with it being somewhat calm and stable. Oh, great. Now, that's not a very long exchange when you think about it. What was that? Maybe 25 seconds? But that is how you stay connected. If you just say, fine, nothing, that's a micro withdrawal. Now, we all do it. We all do it from time to time, but you have to start asking your question, is that your default position with almost every question? Right? Are you withdrawing in these small ways as your default? Is there less eye contact? I cannot tell you how important it is to look at your partner in the freaking eye. The worst place to have a fight is in the car because you cannot make eye contact. And what happens is when there's no eye contact, when you don't turn towards each other, there isn't a sense of intimacy. The animalistic part of our brain looks at eye contact in one of really only two ways. You're either about to get in a fight, like if you're at a bar, let's say, and somebody's staring you at the eye, right, and saying, "What's the problem, buddy?" You're going to get in a fight if you don't diffuse that situation. Watch two people at a bar who are a little bit tense, right? Or anywhere on the street or even in a movie. Actors do this naturally. If someone's staring them in the eye, they don't just stare back and have a neutral conversation. They look away. They go, hey, things are all right. Hey, let me get you a drink. And then they look at the bartender, get him, because eye contact can be very threatening. Now, if there's no threat, if it's obvious there's no threat, which is hopefully in your marriage, right, or your relationship, then it becomes intimacy. Very popular exercise for couples to do. It's a little bit awkward to do in session, right? But on retreats, if my wife and I are like throwing a retreat with other couples or something, we do this exercise. I'll have them stare at each other for 5 minutes in silence and just focus on different emotions, gratitude. It's incredibly intimate. Now, it always starts with giggling because it's awkward, because your brain's trying to figure out, is this a threat or is this a way to connect? But that eye contact is huge. So when you have less eye contact, when you're pulling away from looking at your partner in the eye, that is a micro withdrawal. Now, there's also delayed responses. So someone asks you a question, you don't answer for a little while. All of that replaces emotional presence, right? When I look at you in the eye and say, "How was your day? Were things good?" Just that tone engages. They go, "Yeah, things were good." "Oh, all right. Good to hear. I'm glad you had a good day." I do it with my kids too. When I ask them how was their day, I try to have a moment with each. I have 4 kids. My wife and I are blessed with 4 kids. They're all great and healthy and a pain in my ass. But if I want to connect with them, I have to remind myself, look them in the eye. Okay. Second pattern, unspoken needs. I cannot tell you how many times I hear a couple that even where one engaged, and I'll give you specifics, right? But one engages in an affair. And the real reason that they've engaged in an affair is because they don't know how to talk about their needs. Women are the ones who typically fall into this trap. So women, again, not all women, there's always outliers here, but the standard is, as a mother, they're used to sacrificing. As a woman, they're used to putting everybody else first. All you have to do is turn on The View and watch the woman talk about how I just want a moment to myself, right? Why is there that sentiment? Because they're doing everything for everyone else. And what happens is they get into this default position where they are afraid to verbalize their needs for a couple reasons. One, they're afraid they won't actually receive their needs. And then there's disappointment. That's actually much harder to live with than, well, they just don't know. If someone asks you, "Would you mind going on a walk with me?" and you say, "I don't feel like it," that's rejection. Whereas if I don't ask, well, maybe he would have, but I just didn't ask. Different story. So there's a fear that they can't actually get what they want. And there's also this feeling of, well, if I have to tell you, does it really count? And that's a horrible, horrible place to live in. And a lot of people live there. Nobody's a mind reader. I hate to be the bearer of bad news. I was a magician for many years. I know how Uri Geller bends spoons. I know how every psychic on TV has ever done a trick. There's no such thing as a mind reader, not a real one, not someone who could just pluck a thought out of your head. Even Oz Perlman, as wonderful as he is, tells you he's not a mind reader, right? So you have to verbalize. And you need to pull it out of your partner as well if they're having a hard time verbalizing. When you don't talk about your needs, not only do your needs go unmet, which is very hard for you, you're robbing your partner's ability to feel like they're contributing to the relationship. You need to let people feel like they're valued in the relationship. This is not about you being selfless. By you not expressing something your partner can do for you, it's incredibly selfish. It's incredibly selfish. Think about it in terms of a parent-child relationship, right? So if your kid is in the kitchen with you and you're cooking something, what does the kid want to do 9 times out of 10? Can I help, right? When something's cool and different and exciting, a lot of kids want to help. Maybe not when they get to teenage years and they're lazy, but when the little kids want to help. And if you say, "No, I got it," you just crushed that kid's spirit, right? What do most parents do if they've been around the block? They say, yeah, and they have them roll out some dough or count chocolate chips. They don't even use the damn thing, right? But they make the kid feel like they're part of it. And what happens? Let's say you're baking a loaf of bread, right? And you have them roll out the dough, or you have them mix the dough and knead the dough, and you bake the dough into this beautiful, crispy sourdough loaf, and it comes out. What do? You say, look what we made. Look what you helped with. And there's such pride that they use their hands and they were involved in the process, and they have a percentage, a little bit of a sliver of the credit of what is this thing that you've made. That's your marriage. If you take away the needs that you have, if you don't give someone a role on how to help you, you won't be able to point to your amazing marriage and say, look what you did for me. Look how wonderful you made me feel. Look how happy we are. You did this. You can't say that because you've robbed them of the opportunity. Now, before we go any deeper, if you're listening to this and you're realizing, yes, this is us, then I want to invite you to something that helps couples reconnect fast. It's called the Marriage Reset Session. It's a single Zoom call where we uncover what's really driving the distance in your relationship and create a simple path back to safety, connection, and closeness without turning it into a fight. If you want that level of clarity and calm in your relationship again, click the link below and book your one-on-one marriage reset session. It's helped hundreds of couples, and it's the fastest way to turn this around together. Now, let's talk about the third pattern. I think you'll notice a theme, right? So the third one is going to be connected straight to the second one. If you have unexpressed needs, what do you think is going to happen? Then you have needs that aren't met. And so what do? You live with a little bit of regret, a little bit of resentment, a little bit of anger. And do you talk about it? More often than not, you don't. More often than not, there's a delay. There's this tension in the room. So what happens? An avoidance loop. Now, maybe you're the one who always brings stuff up. And maybe your partner is the one who doesn't know how to respond, and so they avoid. But there's almost always an avoidance loop. Now, if you're big into attachment theory and you know about anxious and avoidant attachment, this is part of it, right? This is the people's inability to resolve conflict is rooted in different attachment patterns. I'm not going to go into attachment patterns. Other videos I've made on the channel, you can watch it. But I'll kind of just lean into this avoidance loop pattern because without a doubt, if you're having problems in your relationship, part of it is not only the problem itself, but the inability to solve the problem, to resolve the problem. And that stems from avoidance on one or both sides of the relationship. Now, what happens when they shut down? This is really important. When you shut down, ask yourself, let's say you want more physical intimacy, very common complaint, especially I would say 70% of the time or so, maybe even more. It's the man wanting more intimacy than the woman. It is flipped, believe it or not, in some relationships, especially as the couples get older. But let's say you're in the position where you're the husband and you want more physical intimacy. You maybe brought it up once or twice, nothing ever happened. And now you just shut down. You don't bring it up. Maybe it's weeks turn into months. In some couples' cases, it can turn into years, and there's nothing happening in the bedroom. And so you avoid. What are you doing in that avoidance? That's my question. What's emotionally going on? So some of you may already know, but in case you're having a hard time, because a lot of times when people avoid, they repress the actual feeling and they don't know how they feel. So, and for those of you who are not the avoidant, but the anxious one chasing after the problem, I'll explain to you what's going on the other side. What happens with the avoidance is you're feeling to yourself, well, I'm never going to get what I want anyway. It never goes my way anyway. And so I'm going to retreat because I know how to take care of myself. You rely on this survival mechanism that says, don't rely on my wife or my husband, just take care of your needs yourself. Now, that's soothing, right? If someone can't take care of you that you were hoping was going to take care of you, and you're able to then solve whatever the problem is, financially, sexual, social, whatever, yourself, you feel like, okay, at least I got what needs to be done. But here's the thing. It creates this gap. It creates this space in the relationship, and you start relying more on yourself and start not even hoping that that's going to be resolved. And so the more you avoid and the more you push that partner away because you feel like you can't get what you need, the more you close off even the ability for them to come back. And eventually, one of you is going to confront the other. Usually the avoidant one gets confronted. That's usually how it goes. Sometimes they get drunk and then all of those walls come down and they explode. So if you've noticed that you're quiet until you've had a couple drinks in you of wine or whatever, then that's, I hate to say, but that's a very common pattern and you have to watch out for it. But essentially what happens is once the confrontation comes, either from your partner or from, having a little bit too much to drink or having a trigger of some other kind, there's an explosion and you start belittling. You start saying, why am I married to you? Or you never do this, or, you always accuse me of that. All of the stuff that you've pushed down in order to be able to survive with the neglect that you're feeling because you haven't learned how to communicate comes right up to the surface all at the same time. And it's too much. It's too much for your partner and it's too much for you. And so you are in this horrible avoidant loop. So the first ones that we talked about, the first two patterns are a little bit subtle, right? It's a micro withdrawal. It's this other, sense of not expressing your needs. What happens? It starts bubbling up to this, under the surface until it can explode and you have a volcano. And sometimes those explosions happen outside of the house with somebody else and they lead to affairs or really rash decisions financially, like buying like a midlife crisis or buying, a condo you can't afford just to have a space away. Different. These are all things that have happened to actual clients of mine. But that's the avoidance loop and you have to really, really watch out for it. If you notice that you're avoiding, you need to find the courage one way or the other to actually have the hard conversation. I know it's hard. I know the idea of bringing something up that has become routine in your relationship is really difficult, but I promise you it won't get better without you talking about it. You need to find the courage to say, I want this, damn it. And I'm going to talk to my partner about it. I'm not going to be angry. I'm going to say, hey, this is something I really want and need in the relationship. And it feels like I can never get it from you. Can we please talk about it? I'm in a lot of pain. I'm feeling very lonely and I want to solve it. Right? That vulnerability, if the person doesn't straight hate you, if you haven't gotten to that horrible point of the relationship, which is always difficult, then there's usually some compassion. Usually there's a lot of compassion when someone takes a chance at being vulnerable and really makes a commitment to stay calm, neutral, compassionate in your tone. So let's talk about the tool I mentioned earlier in the video, which is how do you fix these patterns? What's one way you can actually reset so that the micro withdrawals don't continue happening, so that the needs don't continue to be expressed, so that you don't run into this avoidance loop where things just stack one on top of the other. So there's a bit of a reset. And like almost all marriage tools, it's based in communication. Some are based in nonverbal communication. You just go for a walk. And the secret to that is obviously you're going to talk on a walk. I mean, you're not going to walk in silence. Maybe the first time for 20 minutes, you'll walk in silence. But if you guys do it every week, and you're not going to be silent every week, that's almost impossible, right? So a lot of these things, even the thing where you're staring at each other that I mentioned earlier in the video for 5 minutes, there's a lot being said without words. And then the real amazing part of even a nonverbal exercise is the conversation that comes after, right? The communication that comes after to confirm what you felt. This one is verbal, so it's a lot easier. I'm not going to ask you to stare into your partner's eyes and not say anything. I'm not going to ask you to do couples yoga or do some kind of weird thing like just go paragliding together and, have that rush of adrenaline be a substitute for good communication. There's a time and a place for that, but that's not what this is. We're going to try and attack these three issues with a reset. A conversational reset takes about, I would say, anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes. And it's really simple. You go to your husband, you go to your wife, and you say, I feel like we're drifting apart. I feel like there's stuff that I miss in your life. I know there are things that you miss in mine, and I want to reconnect. I would like to take 15, 20 minutes on Wednesday night after the kids go to bed, if you guys have kids, where we can talk. And I want us to say one thing that's hurt us in the relationship recently, one thing you appreciate about the relationship, and one need you have that might be unmet. And I'll do the same. And we'll take turns. and there's no judgment, and there's no anger. This is really just about reconnecting. That's the reset. It's one need, one hurt, one appreciation. If you want to start it with a little bit more warmth, if things have been a little bit tense, lean into the appreciation first and spend a little more time on it, right? A lot of people, when I say, can you tell, if I'm having a couple in a session, I'll say, turn to each other and say something you like about the person. And they'll pick the dumbest, stupidest thing. I mean, it's like when people are angry, they look for the freaking way out that's so easy. Lead the way, right? It's like, well, you wore a really nice shirt. You look decent in the shirt. I mean, talk about a half-ass compliment, right? This is a good compliment. Let me show you what it looks like. I realized I was thinking about my life when I was single and how lonely it was and how I always wanted a house that felt warm and felt like it was full of life. And I realized you bring that to my life. You bring the warmth in the house. You make the house feel alive. And as much as we fight, I always appreciate that the house feels like it's breathing. And that's 100% because of you. That's a compliment. That's something you could take to the bank. Dig deep. Talk with passion, right? Don't just say, you're always beautiful. Don't just say, oh, I can't, I always like that you take me on dates. Lean into it. If the person's beautiful, just say, I wake up in the morning sometimes and I just stare at you and I think, man, I'm lucky to be with someone who's so beautiful. That's a compliment, right? Lean into the compliment. Lean into the appreciation. Then when you get to the hurt, go into the hurt a little bit. Say, this is hurting me. I don't necessarily know how to fix it, but this is something I'm struggling with, and I think you should know, right? And when you go into the need, make it specific. I can't tell you how many times I say, what's a need you have to a man or a woman? And they say, well, I can use more physical attention. What the hell does that mean? Does that mean you want a handshake? Does it mean you want to cuddle on the couch? Does it mean you want more sex? Does it mean you want all of that? It's too overwhelming if you just say, I want physical stuff. Okay, well, fine. If that person's in the mode where they want to take the easy way out, they'll give you a hug once a week and then they'll say, there, right? I'm going to tell you one quick story. I literally had a person where I said, do you know that her love language is physical touch, one of her primary ones? He goes, yeah, I've been poking her my whole life. I said, what do you mean poking? He didn't mean the dirty poking. He said he literally takes his finger and he goes, touch. I'm like, that's so freaking insulting. If someone says I'm hungry, that's the equivalent of you giving them one kernel of corn. That's horrible. And the woman started crying when I said that because someone actually saw the pain. And he didn't realize, he got so used to being such a prick in that moment. And he's like, oh yeah, that's fine. I'm touching you, right? Because he had a sensory issues. He didn't realize how much that's pouring salt on a wound. Be specific. Say, I would like a 20-second long hug. I would like to try and have real intimacy in the bedroom at least once a week. On Wednesdays, let's plan it. Let's talk about what it looks like. Is there foreplay? Is there this? Is there that? You have to be specific with your needs. If the person can't give you that need, adjust the need or adjust your expectations, right? Well, I can't commit to once a week. What can you commit to? Once every other week, once every 10 days. Okay, let's try that. Better than what you got now, right? So that's the reset. It's 15, 20 minutes. You lean into a deep compliment. You talk about a pain you're having and you get specific with your needs. Try it. Now you know exactly why couples drift and how to rebuild the connection that feels lost. And if you're ready for guidance that's specific to your relationship, book your marriage reset session at the link below. I'll help you break the pattern, rebuild safety, and get your relationship back on track. I'll see you on the inside.